the last of today's workshops and this morning, excuse me, then the appointments continue in the afternoon and also tomorrow morning. And while they are getting ready, I call on stage Luca Scuriatti and Simone DeSantis, who are CEO and CTO of Openapi, respectively. We talk about AI and data, Openapi and OpenAI, how data quality impacts generative AI, hallucinations in AI. The location in the networking area where you can meet them is number 122.
Hello, everyone. This webinar will be on the problem of hallucinations in the AI world. What does that mean? So, I'll introduce the company a little bit in the meantime. Openapi is an API marketplace. API, for those who don't know, are a data or service communication architecture that has been widespread in the marketplace now for more than 10, 15 years, maybe more. No, exactly 11 years. From 2000, let's say 12, was born the concept of Openapi, or Swagger. We were born pushing the concept of data quality. As written in this quote from Deming, "Without data, you are just another person with an opinion." What does that mean? In fact, there is a big difference between what you think and what you know. So, giving a piece of information or knowing exactly a piece of information, what certain data means or certain information makes a big difference. AI has amplified this problem, and we will now go on to see how and why. Let's look a little bit at the API market. APIs are a market estimated to be about $3 billion a year, and we estimate to grow 21% per year until 2033 for a market of about 20 billion. This, of course, the API world is all around us, even if we don't know it. Imagine Netflix rather than Google, rather than Amazon Web Service. By now, much of the marketplaces are native APIs or have become APIs as a possible spin-off marketplace of free-to-paid service. We, as Openapi, openapi.com, have focused on data quality. Why this? A big problem that there has been in the API world has been the quality of information. It is estimated at 90 billion, the global fractured loss, due to the quality of the data or information of the service offered through APIs. Why is this? Imagine that you need information from a company. There are now thousands of APIs on scraping business data, real estate information data, personal information data. Where the product or service does not require quality, it may be fine, but often this lack of quality ruins the business, ruins the project, ruins the business idea that maybe was behind it, was substantial. So various API marketplaces have opened up in the world, and we are focused on the quality of services and data. Hence a big process that is then mentioned here precisely in these 5 steps of reviewing data or services. So accuracy, completeness, reliability, relevance, and topicality, which are repeated cyclically until we have brought the company to a certification on the quality of data and services, the XX-V22. I think in Italy we are 3 or 4 companies that have this certification on data and service quality. What has this entailed? On the one hand, an extreme, unfortunately slow pace for those who know us in giving a new API, a new service, because there is a process obviously much longer than that of launching the product and then a customer issue of whether the quality is there or not of the service, which unfortunately or fortunately for them, other marketplace providers do. We have gone down this path, this road of focusing on quality, so on giving certain data or certain services to customers. These are, to give examples, the API on business information from Italian or French companies. When I talk about the certain data, it means the source. Really in Italy, easier than quoting it, the Chamber of Commerce, or Infograph in France. And then official data on any information can be related to a company, a person, a property, a car. Last week we launched an API in Italy, Germany, England, and France on automobiles. So from a car license plate to have a range of insurance information, obviously within the very strict limits of the regulations. So having more than 400 APIs, each API is subject to regulation. So imagine text messages with Agicom, the car license plates on privacy in Italy, trivially handled with the inability to give information about the person, about the holder. However, within a very stringent regulation, so a fairly structured but complex to be able to access these services. We got a large API pool from official documents, automatic signature, European electronic invoicing, now Italian, but shortly, despite sending electronic invoicing in Poland, France. So a wide range of APIs where you take the problem of data enrichment and the risk of data hallucinations. As you see below, there are quotes. We had these quotes generated by AI. Half of these quotes are false. What does that mean? We asked the AI to make quotes on the API. You can make a set of quotes to put in API representation. I don't know whether with Gemini or ChatGPT, we then saw that half of those quotes were consistent but false. What does that mean? That those people that the AI gave as the person who made those quotes were not true. Doubt had arisen from an initial quote we saw. Strange that this manager or administrator had made that quote. Indeed, it was not true. However, the AI gave it as true. Or other instances, we searched within a street directory for a street, asked the AI where that street was, totally wrong. Area or reference, it was all consistent. So obviously we are in an AI conference, so we know what semantic consistency means, semantic engines. So the sentences were well placed, the concept were well placed. However, they were all wrong, i.e. credible, truthful, but wrong. This what it means within the API, the Open API. Then I leave it to Simone and the CTO to go a little bit more vertical and more into the technical. It means always what is the goal of the project, the enterprise or the software that we are going to develop, whether the goal is of mass information or of content generation, that's perfectly fine. AI is very successful, obviously will have an infinite evolution. But if the goal is a certainty of data, yesterday by pure chance we were at the restaurant here in Rimini, and by pure chance the cashier, the API has the cash register, the classic stress, invoice for the business, the company data. Now we will take 20 minutes given the VAT number, the software had all our data and it was correct. We know it was ours because we are currently the only ones giving the billing code, the famous SDI code. So we saw that then it was our customer. In short, the group that develops that electronic cash register is our customer. Hence the importance of how a quality API makes life easier. In a second from the VAT number. Invoice received, even picky, because within the track there is also picky. So in that case, obvious that that information, that restaurant, that software company that did that, could get it with other APIs, with other providers, maybe with scraping corporate data. What's the difference? A billing gap, when we're talking about 90 billion lost revenue, a billing waste is lost time for the company. I put the invoice is discarded, I have 15 days to redo it, otherwise I get a fine in Italy. Abroad it's not like that. However, I have to put the invoice back. A person wasting time and work. This is because I didn't have the certain data of the company to invoice. Imagine the certified SMS. I send a text message for an OTP or 2FA. It is not certified, it is not at Normagicum, it is not compatible with other European or Americans for various regulations. That's where my project that has to do a two-factor identification doesn't work, but not because the project is done wrong, because I chose the wrong API. And so I'll leave it now to Simone, who will go into a little bit more detail on what hallucinations mean and some very specific cases on hallucinations in the API world. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for being here to listen to some of our stories about hallucinations. I'll start by making a quick introduction, as we are all here for a fairly simple reason, the interest that is so strong today with respect to the world of AI. As with all technologies, it has occurred to us in previous speeches to check out the possibilities offered by so many technologies. Technologies have to be used in a conscious way, so clearly starting from a research and development phase, but possibly analyzing all that are the negative or dangerous aspects for the implementation at a business or professional level. So in this journey that many companies present here today have taken, we have begun, as many have, to play with AI. So basically we started to see we are a deeply data-driven company. So as our CEO has previously explained, we deal primarily with data, with providing data through APIs, with validating data, with verifying the quality of this data. So we started playing with our data and AI, and we noticed this phenomenon that is widely documented in scientific literature, hallucinations. So we tried to figure out how we could get out from this little impasse that was there, which made any project related to these implementations potentially dangerous when applied in certain accidental areas where accuracy, quality of information is vital. Now, in this slide, we have some examples that we have collected, but everyone, depending on their business, can certainly formulate new ones. For example, a big aspect of managing our data is really for forecasting or driving decisions that are data-driven. As we can see in these small examples that we put, for example, hallucinations, which we'll go on to explain well what they are, can create major problems in AI implementation, especially when we go to manage financial data or otherwise policies based on risk or risk assessment. What is hallucination? We will never go into detail, never into the technical, so we will try to make an explanation as simple as possible. Basically, let's imagine as the generative AI, a nice crossword puzzle where we know perfectly well the number of boxes we have available. We also have the question ready, or at least the definition ready, and we have only some boxes already filled in. The generative AI will just fill in the empty boxes, then complete our prompt, our request, by filling in all the empty boxes. The greater the number of empty boxes, the greater the risk that the proposed solution is on what we will call an imaginative basis. There are actually very specific motivations, technical ones that are still being studied at the value of the major players in generative AI. Recently, I think last week, Microsoft stated that they have potentially solved the problem, but practical to date, there is nothing, and this is still a consistent problem. So imagine, as Luca explained earlier, for example, the hallucinations in NPLs. So incorrect data or incorrect predictions related to geolocation or in digital trust processes. Or just imagine if we have to go and make decisions in finance based on data that are assumed not actually validated. The process leading to the use and implementation of generative AI can be extremely complex. We can summarize it in two main phases. There is a first phase where we go to train our model. Then we go to generate a model based on massive data sets. Generalist AIs normally tend to use publicly available generic data sets. We talk about internet pages, we talk about Wikipedia pages, we talk about forums, blogs. So in this kind of context, we don't have certainty of the data. We never have concrete verification and validation of this data. In this small example, we did it live. We the other day recorded it here to bring it to you. We did a very simple thing using Gemini from Google, which is one of the most promising technologies in the field. We asked for information about our own company. We imagined that based on the immense data set that it is trained on, despite the lack of context, the answers would be at least valid, reasonable. What emerged was that despite a generally reasonable verisimilitude, the word Luke used, and verisimilitude is the most dangerous thing in the area of data because it rubs us the wrong way. This data is all completely wrong except that it is verisimilitude. The growth trend is perfect, correct sources, correct notes even if they are very flattering. However, we agree with them. But in general, this information, if it had been used, for example, by a manager to make a decision, for example, at a specific stage of acquiring a customer or a supplier, you understand what kind of danger is behind this particularity. what are the main causes then? We talk about training data that is not accurate or at least not validated. The source of the data is on the internet. It is available to everybody, but nobody tells us that that information is actually true. Another part that we normally identified as a possible cause is the lack of context data, which is kind of the second part of using AI, which is I first create my model, then I can provide a specific context for this model to allow it to work using the information that I initially used for training, assisted by more specific contextualized data for the specific request we are making. The last part that we have identified is the bias part. So the whole part of the biases that may be present in the original dataset, which normally, if we have a validated dataset, or at least with a high quality, we go over, because we only have actual data, not opinions, not social context applied to the training part. So by doing a series of tests and experiments, we looked for solutions. Now, the real solution to date would seem not to be there. We have, however, found a way to clearly reduce all these issues by simply using our own data, but perhaps modifying in some respects the usability of our APIs, which we then somehow made extremely more convenient and practical to use in training or as a context for LLM. So the big generalist language models that are normally available. So having an API available that allows us to do contextualized queries or large volumes of mining for initial training, and then specific queries that serve as context to the actual query to eventually solve a problem. Let's bring in an example today of an API that was recently implemented according to these principles, where we took all that was our immense data set related to Italian business confirmations that we are recently expanding to other European nations as well, and revised the way we were presenting this data and how we were giving the ability to query the data. Clearly, for all of this, you need performance, because you need extremely low latency in the API, a lot of flexibility, because these APIs need to be queryable in so many contexts, in so many specific cases, that we as of today cannot know. We can only know what we have already been asked by our customers, with whom we have a constant feedback relationship, because clearly they are then the ones who give us the real feedback on our products. The final word that is most important for us is reliability. So to have a service that is always available, that has reliability, so a very high SLA, we propose 99% on our APIs, which is exactly what we get from the top players in this industry. And then to finally have the availability, even in our experiments, we have been able to verify of these APIs that allow us to solve some of these problems. And this is another quick example of the API company where we put in a high-performance search engine. We are always talking about 200 or 300 milliseconds for the response, despite a data set that includes almost on the 20 million companies between present and past. So there is also a whole history to query for possible other predictions. Here we have included a number of possible parameters that are queryable to get data sets or specific information about a specific company. We have also included a whole part about to geographic areas, because, for example, I want to expand my business in the Rimini area. I have to have the ability to contextualize, to provide as a context to my query the Rimini area, so that I have extremely timely information. And then the work that is done by the LLM becomes extremely simpler, more timely, more precise, because there is basically a data set that is extremely inclusive of a lot of information. Here, for example, there is an example of a data set that we return. So in the face of a search, then for each company, we are able to provide a very substantial amount of information without us going into detail and listing them all. However, we go from very detailed financial information, then the whole discourse, financial statements also in their historical. So it allows us to go and identify also any trends of dependent budgets, therefore more data sources, however, verified. And along with data on the GPS part. So for all the talk of geo-referencing or data that we are quite proud of, like the whole part of the PEC discourse and everything that is needed, for example, for billing, the example that Luke earlier came trivially from a need of ours. We have, by the IT department's misfortune, a really significant amount of annual invoice documents that we go to issue, and we didn't want to create a giant administrative structure to handle the massive amount of waste that we had on a daily basis. We are an IT company. We have to solve this problem in an IT way, so we refined our data set first to solve this problem for us. So to date, we are proud to have a now ridiculous amount of waste, if not close to zero, despite the thousands of daily invoices our company issues. The whole invoicing process to date, we are happy to say, is handled quietly by 2 people who can do the work of 20 people, simply because the mechanism is well oiled and everything works smoothly. This is possible in so many other areas. So where today there is a human process of constant review, we can relieve people from this attention, because with a good data normally goes to solve this problem. To conclude, first of all, thank you for your patience in hearing this. I don't know if it is the last intervention before lunch, so thank you very much for still being here. However, concluding, the solution for us to the problem of hallucinations was to specifically deepen the quality of the data to such a level that even if the phenomenon actually lingers, it becomes undetectable, or at least not as harmful as it might have been at the beginning of our journey without that specific data set. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again to Luca Scuriatti and Simone DeSantis, who brought us into the world of AI. And now, for this morning, the workshops in this room are concluded.